So going back to before vacation, we were talking about how, the United States is watching different dictators rise up in Europe and Asia or the Soviet Union and Japan. And they ultimately decide on this policy of neutrality to keep out of war. However, neutrality begins to break down towards the end of the 1930s, and in 1937, Japan launches an attack on China, um, and FDR sends some money to China to help them out, um, saying that he isn't really technically breaking the Neutrality Act because they're not China and Japan aren't at war. But FDR basically wants to make these aggressive nations, be isolated from each other and stop war. Well, this is what continues to go on in Europe here. So in section two, um, we're going to talk about how World War II started. Um, so Germany are in the map of Europe here. So Germany is in the northern central part of Europe, and what Hitler does is what Hitler wants is he wants to take over the entire continent, basically. So start with, he picks these little places he can bargain for, and one is the Sudetenland. So there's 3 million German speakers in the Sudetenland. Sudetenland is this brownish part here, and Hitler says falsely that the Czechs, who are the Czechoslovakians, that they are abusing the Sudeten Germans, and basically that he wants to protect the German people wherever they are. So he amasses some troops on the border. In 1938, the Prime Minister, Daladier, and Neville Chamberlain meet with Hitler. So they signed this thing called the Munich Agreement, which we talked about before vacation, and it basically just gives the Sudetenland to Germany without any war being fought. And remember, Chamberlain gave Hitler the Sudetenland in the Munich Agreement to hopefully prevent war, because Hitler's like, oh no, this is the last thing I'm going to ask for, and now we won't take any more land. We just want to protect our German people. We have the right to protect these German speakers in the Sudetenland. And Chamberlain, he thinks that's telling the truth. Winston Churchill, on the other hand, says that this is a terrible idea. Appeasing Hitler is just going to cause him to do more aggressive actions. Appeasement means giving up your principles to pacify or please an aggressor. So Churchill, he rightly predicts that this is not the last thing Hitler's going to ask for, and it's just going to feed into his, his megalomania, his drive for power. So Germany, once he gets the Sudetenland, Germany starts taking real military action. One of the things that Hitler had to do was make nice with Stalin. So here, this little cartoon is from that time period, and it has them in a marriage, which is supposed to be funny in that they are like best friends all of a sudden, and making all these agreements with each other, and people think that this is an American cartoon or a British cartoon, I think, and it basically is trying to say that they're in cahoots together, and what kind of an awful marriage is this of Hitler's fascist Nazi regime and then Stalin's communist dictatorship. So anyway, in March of 1939, German troops occupy the rest of Czechoslovakia. So that little inside piece there of Czechoslovakia, Germans just move right in there. Hitler charges that the Poles, which are people from Poland, or the Polish, mistreat the Germans in Poland. So he's like on this mission to rescue the Germans wherever they are, even if they're not within the German borders. So many think he's bluffing, and he's lying about this. That's not really happening to the German people in Poland. And invading Poland would bring a two-front war between, for Poland, it would be on both sides. Or Germany rather, would be from both sides, from, the west or France, and the east is Poland. Stalin and Hitler decide to make a deal together. Then they sign a non-aggression pact. They agree that they will not attack each other. And they also secretly agree, without Poland's knowledge or permission or anything, to divide Poland between them. So in this map here, you can see we have Germany over here in the west, Russia here in the east. What they did is they took Poland, which is this country right here, and they split it up. And Germany would get West Poland, Russia would get Eastern Poland. The capital is Berlin, is right in the middle somewhere here. So that is what is going to happen for, Germany and Soviet Union. So Hitler kind of thinks that this will make it cool with Stalin that he takes over, this land of Poland. But, what do we think he's going to do? You think Hitler's going to be happy with this piece of land here? Probably not. He's probably going to want more and more and more. So in order to follow through on this pact, this agreement to split Poland, Hitler launches a blitzkrieg. And blitzkrieg is the German word for lightning war. So it was a really, really quick air raid of dropping, many, many bombs at once onto Poland and the major cities there. And then also at the same time taking tanks and having the tanks roll into towns and farms and things like that. And just kind of destroying, property and killing people. So through this blitzkrieg, Germany annexes or adds Western Poland, and the Soviet Union in the western side, they also add the western part of Poland. So because of these actions, France, which is this country right here, France and Britain over here, declare war on Germany, and World War II begins. So that immediate impact again of the Blitzkrieg is that, Poland is taken over by Germany in the west, Soviet Union in the east, and France and Britain decide that's enough, Hitler, and they declare war on Germany. And so this is the beginning of World War II. Okay, the invasion of Poland really starts World War II because it causes France and Britain to declare war on Germany. So there are a number of battles and skirmishes in this early part of the war. There's something called the Phony War, where the French and the British soldiers were sitting basically on this line, the Maginot Line here, this blue line here, and they were facing the Germans, and the Germans would laugh at them and say they're holding a sitzkrieg, like they're sitting there waiting for the Germans to come attack. So basically, there wasn't any action here for Germany and France. They're just kind of sitting there waiting to see if Germany's going to try to go through. Now, the reason this Maginot Line is important is because through here in Belgium, there's very, very thick forest called the Ardennes, and it would be unlikely, although it did happen, it was unlikely that Germany was going to be able to attack France through this very dense forest here in Belgium. So Stalin, in the meantime, is on the eastern side of Poland, and over in the eastern part of Europe. Stalin is adding the little countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and also Finland. So just go back to the map up here. So Russia continues to take over. They take over these countries here. Hitler ends up taking over the lower countries in Europe, which mean lowlands, like physically they're lower, closer to sea level. So Denmark and Norway, and then some other smaller countries. So France is obviously going to be invaded here. So the German army actually ends up going through the Ardennes, this big forest, and going right around this Maginot Line. So the French and English are anticipating Germany's going to come right through this line here. Instead, they do end up going through the Ardennes forest, through Belgium, and into the heart of northern France and into Paris, the capital. So the British and the French end up being trapped in this city called Dunkirk, which is now a beautiful beach, seaside city in France. But back then it was a war zone. There was a movie called Dunkirk that came out a few years ago, um, which shows what happened to the French and the British. And what happens is, in the end, is basically that the people in the United Kingdom, they take regular people who have boats, and they rescue these soldiers, because basically the soldiers were trapped on the beach and they were gonna all be killed, and a lot of them were, but the vast majority of them were saved by British civilians, actually, and brought back to England. In 1940, Italy invades France from the south. Remember, Italy and Germany are allies, and the Germans are going towards the city of Paris. Eventually, France falls and Germans occupy northern France. So Germans get all this part of France here. In the south, what happens when France surrenders, and you read about that in the text, is France surrenders and the Nazis take over northern France. And then in the south, they set up this kind of, they call it a puppet government, where there was a French person in charge of the southern France, which was called Vichy France, but the Nazis were really in control of that person. So a general in France, Charles de Gaulle, he sets up a government in exile in England. So he does run the legitimate French government still, but he has to actually go to England and try to manage his government and his troops from there, while the Nazis have taken over all of France. And remember, France is much, much smaller than the United States, so it's not as unbelievable that one small country could take over this country. Here we see Hitler, taking pictures in front of the Eiffel Tower after he invaded France. So what you have here now, by 1941, 2 years into the war, is you have a real fortress built up in Europe. By the end of 1940, Hitler controls most of Western Europe with his ally Mussolini's help from Italy. Germany and Italy together are known as the Axis powers in World War II. We'll talk about them later. So they basically controlled all of Europe. Hitler has, other ideas of what is going to happen in the future. And at this point, this whole continent is basically taken over by the worst dictators in history. And so what now do you think that the United States is going to do about this?